Today, Rainbow. Mike from Tales from Gjallar. Welcome to the second album review of metal and hard rock albums. Today, Rainbow. But Mike, you say, Rainbow isn't really that metal. Why are you ranking them? Well, I'll tell you why. 3 reasons. Number 1, I like them all. They're just really good albums. Number 2, a lot of the people who are in Rainbow went on to have very significant careers in other, in the 80s and beyond in other bands like Dio, Graham Bonnet, Joe Lynn Turner, Bob Daisley, Cozy Powell, etc. So it's really of interest. And third, and primarily, if you played Rainbow at an 80s heavy metal party, you probably wouldn't get your ass kicked. And that is the litmus test for any kind of music. Not getting your ass kicked at an 80s heavy metal party. It's a relatively short discography, as fans are aware. Ritchie Blackmore, after leaving the Mark III lineup of Deep Purple, which was Coverdale, Hughes, Lord Payson, Blackmore, left and co-opted the American band Elf. They throw out the guitar player and bam, you had Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. So between 75 and 83, they put out 7 albums, at which point Blackmore went back to a Mark II Deep Purple reunion, very successful one, of course, releasing Perfect Strangers. That seemed to be it for Rainbow. However, fast forward another decade, and after releasing Deep Purple's Battle Rages On in 93, Blackmore once again left Deep Purple, squeezed out one album seemingly out of nowhere. At that point, after the tour for Stranger in Us All, the 1995 release, Blackmore was sucked into a time-space continuum disruption and went back to the 16th century to become a minstrel or play medieval music. I've listened to a lot of the Blackmore Night albums. Let me correct myself. I've listened to about 30 seconds of some of those albums. I mean, that music's fine if you're at a medieval banquet or strolling through a Renaissance festival, but no thanks. So it appears that these 8 albums or releases that we have with us today are about it for Rainbow. However, Blackmore did come out with yet another Rainbow lineup. Did some concerts, released some singles. 2 of them were all music, 2 were covers of their old material, and there was one pretty good song, and it was called The Storm. Yeah, it doesn't seem likely that Mr. Blackmore will return to the present day, still stuck being a minstrel back then. So we're left with 8 albums, and they're a little bit challenging to rank in the sense that, like I mentioned, I like them all, but they're very different. The first 3 albums, with Dio on vocals, tend to be quite a bit different from the subsequent releases, which were a bit more on the commercial side. But again, I like them all, so it's challenging in that sense. They never had the same lineup, exact same lineup on any album. So again, you had a big difference in most of the releases. So, of those 8, which one is the bottom? Well, even though I really like this album, I'm going to go with the last one they did, which was released in 1995. Stranger in Us All, as you can see, Blackmore in a scarecrow-esque pose on the cover. This one kind of, like I mentioned, kind of came out of nowhere. It was with a completely revamped lineup from the decade earlier. You did have Doogie White singing on this, who has a very good, clear, strong voice, and 3 other people that, Greg Smith, Paul Morris, and John O'Reilly on drums. Not exactly the dream lineup that Rainbow fans had hoped for, but they put out a pretty strong release, especially considering this was in the mid-90s, and a lot of the legacy acts from the 70s to 80s were putting out not their strongest material. One need look no further than Iron Maiden or Judas Priest, Dio. But Blackmore was able to squeeze out a pretty darn good album. Even though it's rated number 8 in my countdown, I still like it quite a bit. Songs like Wolf to the Moon starts off with, Cold Hearted Woman, good, strong, hard rock songs. Hunting Humans, sort of a vampiric feel to it. Probably my favorite on it was called Too Late for Tears. Just a good, solid rock song with a nice galloping pace. Hall of the Mountain King. That one, as classical music fans will quickly recognize, a lot of the music is taken from Edvard Grieg's Peer Gynt Suite, the very famous Hall of the Mountain King. I'm not usually a fan of mixing classical music with hard rock or metal, but this one's pretty good. I don't know what Edvard Grieg would say if he were alive today. Help, let me out of this box, I'm still alive, help. Still I'm Sad, the album finishes off with. This one, I do like this one. As Rainbow fans will recall, this is an old Yardbird song that they did a cover of on the first album. There was just a music, it didn't have any lyrics. They did a remake of it again here on this album with vocals, and it really turned out well. If you were interested in hearing Dio sing, I usually don't talk much about live albums, but Rainbow's 77 release on stage featured a live version with vocals. The album itself, as far as live albums go, I'm not really a fan of. I mean, there's like a 15-minute version of Catch the Rainbow. If you enjoy listening to someone squawk on a guitar for 8 minutes at a time, do check it out. But they had a pretty good version of Still I'm Sad on it. This one has a Japanese bonus track. You know what is it? Why did Japanese people get all the cool stuff? They get extra bonus tracks. They get cool baseball team names like Buffaloes or Carp. Or Whales. Well, not Whales anymore, I guess the Bay Stars. I became very interested in Japanese baseball as a lad. My favorite team was the '79 Hiroshima Toyo Carp, with the slugging outfield of Adrian Garrett, Jim Little, and the magnificent Koji Yamamoto. Throw in the Japanese Iron Man at third base, Sakio Kinugasa. It's quite a team. But hey, I could talk Japanese baseball all day. We're here to talk about Rainbow. This one, again, if you haven't tried it out, I certainly urge you to. It's a good album. Again, even though I rate it number 8, recommended. And before I go on to the number 7 in the Rainbow album rankings, please remember, do not subscribe to Tales from Gjallar. Do not like this video. The number 7 album, Been Out of Shape from '83. We thought this was going to be the last Rainbow album. This one suffers a little bit in people's minds that it's a little bit softer, not as hard-edged as some of their previous work, and that's largely true. The production's a little bit lighter, I guess you'd say, than some of their heavier work. Still has some very good stuff on it. It opens up with Stranded. Fire Dance is a very good, fast-paced rock song. Of course, Street of Dreams. You know, Street of Dreams is just a gorgeously constructed and played song. Very subtle guitar work by Mr. Blackmore. Snowman, very evocative instrumental. You know, ends up with Make Your Move. You know, this is overall, it's a good hard rock Rainbow album. It's certainly not their heaviest work, and I think that's why in a lot of people's minds this rated lower than a lot of their other work. So, number 7, Been Out of Shape. Desperate Heart, before I forget about it though. That was another one I always really enjoyed. It has a very nice, slow, acoustic intro. Good stuff. In fact, when I was a young lad, actually my father had purchased this album. I didn't have to buy it with my own money. He was a man of very eclectic musical tastes, my father. He liked a lot of prog rock, but he also liked a lot of the harder stuff like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, so it's probably in my genes why I like this stuff. Number 6. Difficult to Cure from 1981. This is the first album to feature Joe Lynn Turner on vocals. Bunch of people doing surgery, it looks like. Rainbow is not known for their magnificent album covers. This one, you know, it's kind of spotty. I would have liked to rate it higher because there's a number of songs I really enjoy on this one, namely No Release, the third track. What a fabulous song that is. It's a simple but brilliant Blackmore riff. Always like Spotlight Kid, Can't Happen Here. Those 3 songs are just fabulous. And in the last 6-7 years, I got to see Joe Lynn Turner live in concert, so it was really neat to hear him do some of these songs. I Surrender was sort of a hit for them off of this. I never really cared for that one. It was a little bit too poppy, a little bit too keyboardy, a little bit too happy. I don't like being happy. And, you know, a couple instrumentals, Maybe Next Time and Difficult to Cure. You know, again, Difficult to Cure is largely borrows from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I'm not a big fan of mixing classical. Stay in your lane, Blackmore. Cut it out. Freedom Fighter is a pretty good song. Lyrics like, I'm a freedom fighter, I've got something to say, I'm a freedom fighter, get out of my way. Even though it has the lyrical complexity of Farmer in the Dell, it's still a pretty good song. Midtown Tunnel Vision, if you like bluesy rock, I don't, so I'm not really a fan of that one. But overall, the highs on this album are pretty darn good. All the Rainbow albums are really, really fine releases, and but this one rates a little bit lower than some of the other 6. So, interestingly enough, there was an EP that came out about this time. It had the B-side of Jealous Lover, which actually got a fair amount of airplay. But confusingly enough, the EP and this had virtually the same cover, so that was a little bit confusing. And I believe I read that this album cover was considered for Black Sabbath's Never Say Die from a few years before. I don't know why. Why would this be so sought after? Guys in scrubs, whatever. Number 5, kind of agonized over this one. 4 or 5, because I really like this one. 1979's Down to Earth, the only Rainbow album to feature the powerful voice of one Graham Bonnet. Graham Bonnet had replaced Ronnie James Dio. Bonnet had earlier been in an outfit called the Marbles, which I believe was a duo with his cousin, and it was nothing like, you know, the hard rock or metal that he became associated with in later years. But this one, it also saw the Roger Glover take over the production and come in on bass for the first time, joining his former Deep Purple bandmate Blackmore. The 2 big songs on this that got a lot of airplay is, of course, the cover of Since You've Been Gone, and then another Rainbow Pen song, All Night Long. Both had videos and pretty heavy rotation in MTV back in the day. Both really catchy, good songs, but there was certainly a change in direction from the fantasy lyrics and theme of the Dio years. But still, really good stuff, and they didn't quite get away from the heavier music on this. There's still some heavier numbers. Danger Zone, Lost in Hollywood. Eye of the World is a fantastic song, almost proggy in some parts. Very good for fans of Graham Bonnet, and there should be a lot of them. He's an outstanding singer. This is some of his best work. Even though I rate it number 5, it's it's still a heck of an album. 4, I know some people would want to rate this higher, and I do too. It's the very first album. The debut album from Ritchie Blackmore. It featured, like I mentioned earlier, the Elf lineup of Mickey Lee Soul on keyboards, Craig Gruber on bass, Gary Driscoll on drums, and of course, R.J. Dio. This one, I guess I rated it a little lower because the production, the overall sound was kind of tepid. It was a co-production of Blackmore, Dio, and the great Martin Birch. If you listen to and maybe it was the performers themselves, but the sound was just sort of lackluster when you compare it to the next couple Rainbow albums. And even if you compare it to the contemporary albums, like, think about the other great hard rock or metal albums that came out in '75, like Black Sabbath Sabotage, UFO Force It, Aerosmith's Toys in the Attic. The production on this really isn't up to snuff, but it still contains just a classic Man on the Silver Mountain, self-portrait. Yeah, it's kind of a downer, but I do like being depressed, so that helps. Black Sheep of the Family is kind of a silly cover. Catch the Rainbow, a nice slow tempoed song. Snake Charmer, He'll Harm Ya. That's a good one. Temple of the King, always like that. Right in there with Dio's sort of sword and sorcery fantasy lyrics. If you don't like rock and roll, that one, I don't know. That sounds like it would have been more at home on an Elf album. If you've never heard the Elf albums, which was Dio and his band before in Rainbow, if you like good time, hand-clapping, boogie rock, you might like Elf. But if you're not suffering from a closed head wound or suffer from a cognitive disability, you will dislike it like myself. There was one song on the last Elf album, which was Trying to Burn the Sun. It was Wonderworld. Sort of held a key to the direction that Dio was going to go in later years. You could argue about how good of a song is, but it was you could tell his overall composition was sort of leaning towards more fantasy and contrarian lyrics. Man on the Silver Mountain, for most of us, was the first introduction to Dio's contradictory lyrics. I'm the day, I'm the night, all that. He loved that. He couldn't get enough of that. I spent one full day of my in the high school writing a whole list of Dio lyrics that I thought he could use, like I am poor, I am rich, I am an irrigation ditch. Fun stuff. 16th Century Greensleeves, another classic. And like I mentioned before, Still I'm Sad, the instrumental version of the old Yardbird song. Good, solid. Every Rainbow fan knows this one. I rated it number 4. I know a lot of people would have rated it a touch higher. The third album, I consider the best of the Joe Lynn Turner era, Straight Between the Eyes. This is just a fabulous release. It was fairly popular when I was growing up here in '82. Songs like Stone Cold got a lot of airplay, as did Power. Some other really strong tracks on here. Mistreated, always loved that one. Death Alley Driver, a nice fast-paced opener to the album. Rock Fever, it's kind of a silly anthemic song. Eyes of Fire is a great album closer for this. Tight Squeeze. Oh gee, what are you guys talking about? If I was Emperor of the World, I would outlaw any sort of entendre or veiled sex reference in songs. That's a dumb idea. Every other song would be called I Like Vaginas, so. Alright, Deep Six that idea. Nevertheless, heck of an album, this one. I remember seeing the tour on TV. MTV played a concert from that tour. You know, it was good. It was neat to see Rainbow on stage. Musically, they were really good. I remember they had some background singers, just kind of, I don't know, wasn't a fan of that. But overall, it was kind of a neat watch. So number 3, Straight Between the Eyes. That one, that was the first appearance of David Rosenthal on keyboards. All right, second, going with the third album, which was the last of Dio's stint with Rainbow, and that's Long Live Rock and Roll. Not a real big fan. I mean, the cover looks like some kind of hair monster with 5 faces sticking out of it, but there's some great stuff on this one. This one featured Bob Daisley on bass, although you know, of course, Bob would go on to fame in Ozzy Osbourne's outfit, among other things, being in Uriah Heep. He was a little bit later in this one. He replaced another bass player, Mark Clark. So Blackmore actually played bass on 4 of these songs. Daisley was there for the other 4. A keyboardist named David Stone, Canadian chap, dipped his toes into hard rock and metal once, and then never was seen again in this genre. Yeah, I always loved this album. Long Live Rock and Roll. Yeah, it's kind of cheesy and anthemic, but it's a great song. It's always good to hear Dio do that one in concert. Lady of the Lake, another fantasy-inspired song. LA Connection. You know, there's always one song on a Dio album or Rainbow that doesn't really fit, and LA Connection's kind of, you know, piano-driven, and Gates of Babylon is magnificent. Of course, just some fiendish guitar work by Blackmore. And then the other side, Kill the King. That's one of my favorite Rainbow songs of all time. That's just a fabulous song. The Shed, Subtle, Sensitive Delight, Rainbow Eyes. Rainbow Eyes gets a lot of, or I've seen online some, you know, criticism as being sort of a soft, curious choice for an album closer. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like it. It sets a nice tone. It is kind of an odd tone to close an album with, but yeah, there's really not too much to complain about on this album. Kill the King. Oddly enough, Rainbow had actually performed that before this album was out in concert. Very first selection, the greatest Rainbow album of all time, in my humble opinion, like most people, is the second album, Rising. This really stepped up the production value from the first album. Blackmore recruited some sort of heavyweights, or were going to be heavyweights in the metal era, with Jimmy Bain on bass, and Cozy Powell on drums, and Tony Carey on keyboards. A great album opener. You know, long keyboard opening, but still really well done. Sets a nice tone. Tarot Woman. Always liked Run to the Wolf, a little shorter song, but all right, that's a really new one. Starstruck. Yeah, it's almost like a boogie-ish number. It is pretty good. Do Your Close Your Eyes closes the first album side when we had albums, and that's kind of an oddly constructed song. It's just a verse, chorus, and it ends. But it's still pretty good. Of course, the centerpiece of the album is Stargazer. Of all the songs written in history about a wizard constructing a tower and forcing people to build it for him, this is my favorite song about a wizard constructing a tower. A Light in the Black ends up. A lot of people have rightly pointed out that this album and Rainbow, Long Live Rock and Roll, were very influential in the genre of power metal. You know, Rainbow overall, I guess you really can't say they were always heavy metal, but these 2 albums did influence a lot of the later power metal bands with their, you know, fantasy-themed lyrics, the interplay between the guitar and keyboards. This one, I saw an interview with Dio saying that this album was a little bit too presumptuous, a lot of, you know, needless soloing guitar and keyboards on it, I think was his point. Most Rainbow fans and Dio fans point to this one as probably one of his finest works, and rightly so in my opinion. So, Rainbow Rising is my number 1. Feel free, leave some comments, let me know your thoughts. I'll probably read them. What else do I have to do? I'm old, I got time. And don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and thanks so much for watching. Some ideas for folks looking for Rainbow hidden gems to try out. If you're not intimately familiar with their discography, you might go out of your way to give a listen to it. I think are well worth listening. One is Jealous Lover, and I mentioned that it was a B-side of Difficult to Cure single. It got its own EP, but it really wasn't available on the CDs that came out later, except for Final Vinyl. If you look on Final Vinyl, that's an album, a collection of live performances, some B-side, And that's a really good one. From Bent Out of Shape, I'd certainly suggest Fire Dance. That's a nice up-tempo number. I always really like the Bring On the Night off Straight Between the Eyes. That's, you know, it's not a typical Rainbow song. It's not particularly heavy, but it's really got a nice chorus. It flows along nicely. Blackmore does some sort of unorthodox, neat guitar work on it. I always like that one. And off of Down to Earth, Eyes of the World. I was delighted when we saw Graham Bonnet over the last few years. Saw him a couple times in concert, and he does Eyes of the World. It's a really good one. It's a little bit longer, a really fine song. So those are just a few, I guess you'd call it, deep cuts. Also off Difficult to Cure from '81. I can't recommend enough going back to No Release. Just a fabulously executed song. It's like one of those songs, even though if you've never heard it before, it sounds like you have heard it. The riff just resonates in your head so much. And it really should have gotten more airplay, I thought. So yeah, those are just some deep cuts from Rainbow. You know, as years go by, we have seen a lot of live releases come out of Rainbow in their earlier shows. The quality is varying, but they're interesting from a historical standpoint. But if you just can't get enough Rainbow after listening to the studio albums, you know, maybe give some of their live albums a try. In 2011, they went back and released a concert from the Stranger in Us All that, of course, had Doogie White. And I think Chuck Berge had taken over drums again by that point. He had played on Bent Out of Shape. And that's a pretty good live listen. There isn't too much in the way of live jam session in that one. Doogie White's, you know, does a nice job, and it's interesting to hear him do some of those older Rainbow classics. It's called Black Masquerade, so check that one out. That's another good example of live Rainbow. Feel free to leave the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. Tales from Gjallar. Thanks so much for watching.